Hello, my name is Lilleith Morrison, and I'm here to talk about coming to England from Jamaica. I now live in Bristol, but I was born in Jamaica in 1948, and I first came to England in 1955 and grew up in London, in Hackney. Then, after completing college and university, I lived in Enfield before deciding that I wanted to travel the world and see a bit more of it. And then so I went off to India and then worked in Tehran, went back to India and around looking at what in Burma, but which is now Myanmar. And then I went on to work in Japan. And then I thought I'd go round the world, but instead I came back to, just in case I was going to be a long time, I came back to England to sort of spend time with family before doing the rest of it, and ended up in Bristol pregnant. And I've been here ever since. I was born in Jamaica in 1948, and my dad, who had actually volunteered before I was born to come and fight with the British Army, like a lot of Caribbean men did during the Second World War, had been to England, and he'd trained in England, been sent to North Africa, where he served till the end of the war, and then went back to Jamaica and was married my mother, had 3 children, and decided he wanted to come back to England. So he came, and I remember my aunt and my mum sitting together, and she was doing a tea reading for my mum, my Aunt Myra. And she looked at the teacup and she said, "Oh, I think someone's going to England." And she was talking about my mum. And of course my mum did go to England, but I think she knew because my dad was there that she was going to be joining him. So she joined him, and I stayed with my Aunt Myra while she was in England. That was slightly odd because I didn't feel like, my Aunt Myra was lovely and she's my favourite auntie. And I have a cousin, Charmaine, my youngest cousin, Jackie, wasn't born then, her younger sister. But they came to stay with us when I was in England. But that's another story. So that's the first time. I wasn't actually told we were coming to England, but I do remember that because it was a precursor to us. My brothers also came, but they stayed with a different auntie when we were in Jamaica. They stayed with my Aunt Sita and my 2 younger brothers. And so I stayed with my Aunt Myra until it was time to go. And a woman called Castra, a family friend, she came with us. And my parents, I suppose because we were children, they decided that we should come by plane. So I remember the plane journey really well. We were sitting behind this French woman who kept turning around and talking to me. She spoke English. Because I had 2 front teeth missing, because I was 7, at that age. And she was singing, "All I want for Christmas is my 2 front teeth," that song to me. And then my brother, because I was not airsick at all and never have been, but he decided to be airsick, the youngest brother at the time, but David wasn't born then, Paul. He was sick into this airbag, and the smell of it made me sick, so we were both sick into the air in these little bags they give you. And then when we got to England, I remember suddenly being given a bottle of rum to put in my suitcase because they wouldn't search it. And that is actually the suitcase that's now in the M Shed in Bristol as part of that Windrush movement exhibition. I must have been about 6 when my mother had that tea reading which predicted she was going to England. Well, it must have been significant because I remember it. So my Aunt Myra would have predicted all sorts of other things that I didn't remember in her tea readings. But I remembered that one, and I think possibly because it was then became established that we were going to go to England. And I mean, my view of England was, I think, the first time I heard about England was when I was very small. I think I was about 3 or something. We collected pictures of the Queen. Whenever her coronation was, we had all these pictures of her coronation, which was put into a scrapbook for me. I mean, we did it together, my mother and I. So that, I think, was my first understanding of England, was the Queen's coronation. I was about 5 then, when the Queen was crowned, and that's when we did the little scrapbook that put it together. So a couple of years later, when I was coming to England, I would have already known about England, and I knew that there was a Queen here. I was told all I knew was it was cold. Really, that was the thing, the most important thing to me, because I left some of my dresses behind, because I thought, I can't take those. They'll be too. I can't. I mean, it would be too cold to wear them, because I remember when I arrived, I thought, oh, I could have taken a couple of dresses that I had, that would have, because it was it was warmer than I expected. I mean, I didn't see any snow at the time, although it was September. It didn't feel that cold to me. Well, my dad had gone ahead of us to find work, and he's not a very good letter writer. He never, in fact, I've only ever had one letter from him when he was working in North Africa. And he was working on the machinery there that were doing the pipelines, when they were laying the pipelines in Libya. And all I got was this letter saying, this place is sand and sand and more sand. So, not being a good letter writer, my mum kind of panicked, I think, and so she left us with her sisters while she came to England. So they were both in England, and I was with my Aunt Myra, and my 2 younger brothers, Vernon and Paul, they went to stay with my Aunt Sita. So I actually didn't see them, and I was, for that year, well, I don't remember seeing them, I might have done. But I have vivid memories of Linstead, staying in Linstead with my auntie. And there was one particular incident that stands out very much for me then. I was with Charmaine, my cousin, and we'd gone and Aunt Myra had just given us some, I think it was lollipops before bed or something, and we heard a noise coming from the bedrooms. So Aunt Myra said, you two stay here. Well, of course, we followed her, didn't we? And this guy came running out of the bedroom with a handbag going, don't scream or I juke you. Of course, Charmaine and I decided to scream our heads off. Anyway, he jumped out of the bathroom window and fled into the night. And it was a night when all the men had gone off to a political meeting. My aunt's PNP, and so they were all at this political meeting. And apparently there'd been a robbery from 3 houses in a row, and we were like one of them. So that is a very vivid memory for me in Linstead. But I remember Linstead anyway, because I used to go to term times. I would stay with my Aunt Myra, and because I went to her school, because she was a school teacher there rather than my local school. Well, I knew that I'd be joining my mother eventually anyway, because she went off to join my dad. And we knew that we would be following. There wasn't ever a time that I didn't think I was, going to stay in Jamaica while she was in England. I knew it wasn't forever. And, I was used to seeing my aunt anyway. I was quite close to her from before, because I used to go to stay at her. In fact, with her when in term times. So it wasn't that unusual for me to be around her, and I remember lots of things. We did a Christmas play, and Charmaine and I were in little pretty white dresses, and we did a little song. I'm a little fairy flower. We did this little song. I remember that, and they found a bird, and they came in with a bird. In I think it might be in Aunt Myra's hands, holding this bird and saying, but they didn't say what it was, and I was scared it was going to be a rat. So I let it go, and it flew off, and I was, and then my aunt told me that if you put salt on a bird's tail, it will tame it. Well, I spent the rest of the day chasing these birds up and down outside in the yard with some salt. And things like that, little things I remember about Linstead. It was about a year before we were reunited with our parents, and the three of us went on this plane, and we got to Heathrow, it must have been, because they came to collect us from Heathrow. My parents, both of them came. And I'd been given this bottle of rum, which I'd put in my suitcase because they wouldn't open it because I was a child, and they didn't. But I remember I wasn't scared at all, actually. And I think my youngest brother, who was 2 years old, he wouldn't go to my mum. And I think she was quite upset about that, because she just felt a great regret at having left him because he didn't seem to recognise her. I mean, he's only 2, so he'd probably not been used to having her around for a year. So I think she felt really bad about that. I mean, she didn't talk to me about it at the time, but later, when we were grown up, I think she sort of said that, how hurt she was, that she felt, of having left, how hurt she was, and that she'd left him at such a young age. Well, when we arrived here, we all spent the night in one room, because they'd bought a house, but we were moving into it the next day. So we were all sort of crowded into one room. And then the next day we moved into the house that we would live in for the rest of my childhood until I got married, in fact. And it was called, it was Forburg Road in Hackney. It was a big house, so they'd let out the rooms at the top while the family had the rooms below. And it was like living in the Commonwealth now I look back on it, because we rented to people from like Indonesia, obviously other Jamaicans, Black Americans, and they were sort of people from what was called Burma, but it's now Myanmar. There were 2 brothers that from there. There were just lots of people that would come over the years, and sometimes stayed friends with my parents for a while and went off, maybe got their own house and then still kept in touch. And in fact, when I was travelling, I went and stayed with some friends of theirs in Indonesia, where they actually offered me a teaching job with that because they were running a language school there, and they'd originally lived in Forburg Road in Hackney with one of the Burmese boys. Well, it was called Burma then. I used to chase around the garden with worms. Although he was almost grown up, he's much bigger than me, but I was a young teenager. Terrible sense of humour. The relationship with my brothers really didn't change much. It was always I was the boss. And Vernon didn't like that, and so we were always fighting. So that never changed. Paul was a much younger, but he was incredibly strong because I tried to put him in a dress and he fought like a tiger. So, yeah, we'd still get on well. At one level we got on well, we played together, but we were always having fights. That's all I remember, Vernon and I. Not so much with Paul, he was much smaller. But Vernon and I are only about a year and 10 months apart, so we were always coming to blows. We get on like a house on fire now. We're really good together, and very supportive of each other. But all during our childhood, it was fisticuffs. house. um, and we used to get the strap. Well, in those days you got the strap, and we used to try and hide it, but we could never find it. Hide it. There was a special strap they had that you just held out your hand and you got hit on it, and we could never find it. Then, while I was at Coburg Road, we had a third brother. I had a third brother, David, who was born there, and we called him the Englishman. And when I was about 14, this young teenage woman arrived from Jamaica, and no one said anything to me. No one said, "This is your sister Mavis." But somehow I knew she was my sister. We shared a room for a while, and she did her training as a nurse. People referred to her as my sister and so on and everything. But I knew nothing about why she was my sister. I knew she wasn't my mum's daughter. I knew she was my dad's daughter. And eventually I did find out her history and her story. And she was actually brought up by my grandparents. They took her in when she was born. And my dad had come to fight in England, but that was after her birth. But no one ever talked about it. No one said a word. It was all sort of osmosis, really, that I just absorbed it from hints and things. And she did her training, her nursery training, and she dated quite a few black American GIs. Not quite a few, but they were always sort of that gang of people around her that were playing this great music in the front room, which I loved. It was like, yes. Because my mum had a piano, and she did play the piano, but it was sort of hymns and things like that, whereas the music that Mavis's friends played were really cool. She was older than me, and she had her own friends. She was sort of like, I was 14 and she was the other end of her teenage years, so she had her social life, and which came to the house, and I really enjoyed that. So I suppose in a way I got to hang around with older teenagers and listen to great music. We didn't become that close in that we didn't do things together. I got my first pair of kitten heels when she got married. It was my Aunt Sita and I that went shopping for that. I don't remember going shopping with Mavis. Yeah, I guess she was a much older teenager, so we didn't hang about together. She had her own set of friends, and I suppose I was just then a skinny little kid that was hanging about when her friends came round. Well, coming to England wasn't entirely positive, no. I mean, we made the best of it, and we made friends, and we settled here and got a life. But there were lots of weird things happened, like the vicar asked me why I was a different colour to my brothers, and I just thought that was normal. People came out different shades. I didn't think there was anything odd about it, but it did give me an interest in genetics. Things like that happened, and I think Mum also felt she was a bit conscious that, like people at church, because she had different coloured children, that they might have different fathers. She was a bit conscious of that. So because she was conscious of the fact that people might think her children were from different fathers, I think it made her feel slightly uncomfortable. She didn't want to go up and say, actually, these children are all from one dad. So there were all those tiny undercurrents that you had, which was kind of cultural misunderstandings. And of course, not so much me, because I fought over beads in the playground, but Vernon was fighting over his colour. So there was that. But Vernon was the best fighter in school, and I could beat him, so I thought, yeah, I'm good. I could beat those sort of things. I just feel like I had the teacher I had didn't like me, and he had no reason not to like me. Well, I wasn't English. I mean, he did things like, there was a moment when he made me stand up in class and told me off for writing a rude note. Well, I hadn't written that rude note, and he absolutely shamed me in front of the whole class and made me cry. And I thought, actually, he must have known my handwriting. You know, why didn't he recognise my handwriting? That he must have known I couldn't have written that note. And there was no reason he shouldn't have liked me except that I was Jamaican. And maybe he didn't like foreigners, I don't know. But there was adjustments that we all had to make, I think, being we were the first black family, obviously. Then the other people came, and it became more common to see people from Jamaica and other countries around in Hackney. I'm not sure what the impact had on me about being separated, but I certainly know that I felt more independent of my mum and dad, and I'm just thinking back, wondering if that actually is why I was so keen to become an independent person, and I was never like wanting to cling to my parents like some people do. I always wanted to get away and have my own life, and I certainly had my own opinions and my own philosophy, and I rebelled very much against my parents in terms of their philosophy and outlook on life. My mother was very religious, and at the age of 8, I decided, when I confronted her about Santa Claus, I asked her, was it true about Santa Claus? Because someone had said there was no Santa Claus, and she said, yeah, that's right. And I thought, oh, you've been making up this thing about Santa Claus to make me behave, or I won't get a present. Well, someone's manipulating you about Jesus. And I knew I couldn't say that to her, but that's what I thought. And I think that independence of thought, that sort of separation from what my parents believed, might well have come from having been separated from them at an early age, or the age of 7. Because I've always felt that from that day on, sort of after Santa wasn't true, I've never really been religious. I also think religion's one of the worst things in the world, because it just makes people fight and kill each other. Most of the time, it doesn't do any good. So I think I feel my dad was the more Jamaican of the two. He loved all the food and the culture and things like that. And we did, would cook Jamaica. He would cook more Jamaican food than Mum would, actually. And we had, my aunties would send us like a Jamaica Christmas cake at Christmas and things like that. And so we always had that connection, and I always felt that connection with Jamaica through the family and the cousins and so on. And we always, because we had this big house, they came and stayed with us. 2 of my aunts came and did a course here in England. One went to Bath, my aunt Myra did. We were living in Hackney, but she would travel to Bath during the week, and then she would come back at weekends. And she took my cousin Jackie, and we shared a room. At that time, Jackie and I, she's a few years younger than me. So when they went back to Jamaica, and when she decided to do her A-levels, she actually came back to England to do her A-levels at the college I went to, because I was like social secretary and departmental rep, and knew where all the parties were and did all this stuff. And she saw me being at college, doing my A-levels, having a good time, so she came back to do it at Tottenham Tech. Well, I suppose she thought that was a good thing, so she came back to do it here. So I've always felt this sort of connection through my cousins and my aunties and uncles. One auntie came and did an art course here, and an uncle was here with her, Uncle Owen and Aunt Myra. And Aunt Sita. And then Aunt Myra did the teaching cookery thing at Bath. So there was always this connection, more through my cousins than with my parents, really.